And welcome back to the Masters of Modern. I'm your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host and other influencer on the internet, Ben Bateman.
Influencer on the internet.
I'm trying to do my best, like I'm like a hot 20-year-old dude on TikTok voice. That's
you are a hot 20-year-old dude on TikTok.
I wish I was still 20. I also I don't think I ever talked down here.
Yeah,
well, that's now
true.
More Southern drawl added there. That's a little bit different.
Some Sean Boswell.
Yeah, my wife would be very, very, very like just like pins and needles on the back of her head hearing me try to do a Southern accent. We are the Masters of Modern podcast. We are a show about modern. We're talking today about the most recent set, Dungeons and Dragons in the Forgotten Realms by Magic the Gathering. It's a Magic set that's set place in the main realm of Dungeons and Dragons, the most popular one. There's a bunch of Dungeons and Dragons-y things. We are reviewing the set for Modern specifically today, but then also just like kind of our vibes on a lot of the cards and mechanics. So definitely, even if you're not a Modern player, stay tuned because it'll be a fun one. We originally were going to do like a big top 10 battle, but we realized that there was just a little bit too many cards to talk about, some cycles that we wanted to go into. So we're just going to break this down by color instead, which makes, I think, Marshall's job a little bit easier by being able to put in the chapters for colors when he uploads it onto the YouTubes. There's chapter features now, so if you look below, you'll be able to do that. And to thank us for making those chapters, you should hit the like button.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty cool set. There's a lot of really interesting cards. We are going to be breaking all of those down. A big thank you to all of our patrons, patreon.com/MMcast. Your guys' support has allowed us to continue to do this podcast, to continue to build it out. And we're really excited as we move forward back into Magic Fest, hopefully next year, and being able to meet more of you guys to evolve and develop the Patreon content to find ways to involve you guys more as Magic kind of opens back up to the masses in person. So thank you all.
Will there be t-shirts? Maybe. Will there be playmats? Maybe. Will there be these types of content? If you guys donate to Patreon and let us know, it helps us know if you want t-shirts and other types of merch, swag, or whatever. All right, so we are going to do this way. We're going to go each color. We're not going to do a Wooburg Orler because I hate rules.
I do really quickly before you do that, would like to just use this moment because something exciting in my life that's upcoming. I buried it at the end of the show last time, and this time I'm just going to throw it right up front here. I've talked about this a little bit on our shows. I have been working for the last year of my life tirelessly on writing and recording an album of music. I put out the first couple songs, and I'm going to be touring. Right at the end of October, I leave. I will be gone all of the month of November. I'm playing 12 shows across the country: Los Angeles, Austin, Nashville, New York, Boston. You can get all of the information in the description of this video. Every one of the shows is going to be kind of like a private event. They're all kind of like a private party. I'm renting spaces. I'm actually going to be playing the full set of songs for you guys and getting to kind of hang out with everybody. So if you've ever listened to the podcast and wondered, it would be fun to hang out and grab a drink together, that's kind of what this experience is going to be like. And you would be supporting something that is incredibly near and dear to my heart in my dream to go out there and play music. I put the tickets on sale last week, and I've sold over 100 tickets already so far across the country. So if you are interested in checking it out, do me a favor, click on the link in the description. The more tickets I sell, the earlier I sell them, the more I can guarantee the venues that I am booking instead of waiting to find out what the capacity is going to be. So thanks for listening to that, guys, and I hope to see you out on the road. Now, without further ado, let's get into our spoiler review of this awesome set.
Also, this episode is sponsored by TCG Player. If you look below, there's a link to TCG Player. If you click on that, it just remembers that you clicked on it. Don't worry about, we're all being spied on by every website we've ever been on, but it puts a little cookie on you, and anything you buy from TCG Player, they'll know that we sent you, and it helps us out. So if you buy stuff on TCG Player, it doesn't cost you anything. Just please click on the link, and that way it'll remember that we sent you. So that's super helpful. We're going to talk about green first. The most powerful color in Magic. That's the rules, everybody. Blue's got an old, lazy, unable to do all the things that green is able to do, including a lot of the stuff that blue can do. It can draw cards. I'm doing the memes. The first thing we're going to start with, though, is Druid class. This is the new class mechanic, and I do want to talk about classes in general. Basically, it is a enchantment class, druid class, 1 and a green. Its first level, as it enters the battlefield, whenever a land, it enters the first level with this ability. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, gain 1 life. That's how it starts. Then, if you spend 2 and a green, it goes to level 2. It still has that first ability, but you may now have the ability to play an additional land on each of your turns. So, level 1, gain life. great stabilizer. Level 2, Azusa's in play. Now level 3 for 4 and a green, when it becomes level 3, target land you control becomes a creature with haste, and the creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. It's still land. So lastly, you have a big threat at the end. I do think this is maybe what I would consider the best class. There's a few other ones that people are hyped on. This is the one that I think I'm most excited by. But just in general, the class mechanic, it was pretty hard to rate. And it's one of the reasons we kind of just gave up on the top 10 list, was that there's just so many of them. So many can do some powerful things. We have a few additional ones we'll be talking about when we get to those colors. This is, in my opinion, the most powerful class in Modern, due to its home and its ability to just like slice right into amulet decks and Primeval Titan decks in general, as a stabilizer that then can grow into an Azusa very quickly, and in a deck that can easily get to 3 mana, or pay to 5 for a 5 mana Azusa, and then in the late game can also become the ability to generate a threat that can be as big as an 8/8 if they're able to stop you in other directions.
Yeah, I think. What do you think about the bringing back leveling up as far as classes go? I mean, I always like leveling up back in the Eldrazi days. It's cool to see it.
I think classes are way better, right? They've fixed all the issues I had with level up. They're no longer on a creature, which like is maybe a little bit of a negative, but by doing that, you're able to do it at instant speed. You don't have to have like all of the different power and toughnesses in the text box. Like that's all a lot easier. So I think they've been able to make it more powerful, right? Because you don't have a creature attached, it's not a threat. You don't have things attached to it like a creature. So this allows you to do all those things. And then stuff like Druid class brings a creature to the table, right? A lot of them do something. There's the cleric one, I also think is one of the ones I like. That one lets you bring for 5 mana reanimate a creature from your graveyard, right? So like they do. There's the hunter one that gives a wolf when it enters play, right? You get a 2/2. So some of them do come with creatures attached. And then as you level up, they're great mana sinks. The fact that they can happen at instant speed, means that they're pretty great. And they're hard to deal with threats, right? Like the other issue with level up creatures was always, I played this 2/2 that I now invested 8 mana into sorcery speed, and they lightning bolted it in response.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't think none of these classes blew my mind too much. I thought this was a pretty cool one. The blue-red one was pretty interesting to me as well. But I think probably this is probably the best one, at least for the green ones.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that it's a new mechanic. It's a new card type, right? Right.
Yeah.
How many times have we been bad at evaluating? And by we, I mean the Magic community at large, bad at evaluating new types of cards. And this is one of those. So I could be very easy. I would not be surprised if even a class that we're not talking about on tonight's podcast ends up being
a good one. I know.
Like,
it's
so
always
good
very
it gets
hard
banned, right? Like it's hard to evaluate something that you've never played with before.
That's always how it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
The next one is legendary creature Dragon, Old Gnawbone in green. 5 green for a 7/7 legendary creature. Flying, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens.
This card is super, super cool. This is one of my favorites. The first thing that really comes to mind with this card for me is Gorya's Vengeance. I just think about doming for 7, but then being left with 7 treasures after you've done that. What means that instead of having to Gorya's Vengeance for your Gristlebrand, now you have the ability to just hard cast Gristlebrand if it's stuck in your hand. So it strikes me as a very interesting card that can go into those Gorya's Vengeance decks because of that. I think it sets up nicely. It's also another green card if you're going to do the Gristlebrand style of deck. It's another one that you can exile to Nourishing Shoal to gain some life.
That's one of the things that makes me really excited by it, right? Like it's and it's the perfect amount. It's a 7-drop, so you can use it with the green shoal to gain 7 life, which is the amount of life you need to keep the train going with Grizzlebrand. That's the key number. Is for those who don't know the way that deck works, is you get a Grizzlebrand into play, and you then use the green shoal, which exiles a green creature from your hand, to gain life equal to X, which is its converted mana cost, which, as long as it's a 7-drop or above, gives you a second hit of drawing 7 cards. So the goal is with Grizzlebrand is to play Grizzlebrand and get green cards with that to keep drawing through your deck until you're able to draw enough other cards that let you gain value. The fact that this also is great in play with the Grizzlebrand in play, right? Where you can attack with Grizzlebrand, make 7 treasures that you can then use to cast the spells you're drawing with Grizzled Brand, making that ostensibly free, and also can combo with stuff like Fury of the Horde, right? Like, because that's what the old Grizzled Brand decks used to do, is they used to chain Fury of the Hordes, which is a card that lets you untap all creatures you control and you get an additional attack step. So all of these cards,
it's the red free exile thing where you can, basically pitch cards from your hand to get the extra attack step. Classic card, Cold Snap, one of those Cold Snap treasures. But yeah, I do think that, I don't see a lot of uses for this green dragon, old Gnawbone, other than probably about what we're talking about. But I do think there are interesting opportunities probably to build a deck around just the Goryo's Vengeance interaction. Just the idea that on turn 2, you can accelerate and be left with 7 treasures. It allows you to do so many crazy things. I just think that alone in itself is a pretty notable piece of tech.
Yeah. Next card is Circle of Dreams Druid. Green, creature elf druid. Tap it, add green for each creature you control. It's a 2/1. To me, this, Elvish Archdruid is already a kill on sight must kill threat in elves. Part of that is the +1/+1 to all elves, right? It gives a little bit of a backup plan, but this is basically just your Archdruids 5 and 6 at its worst case scenario. Then you add the layer of this is really good in mono green Stompy decks or other mono green decks or red green Devotion, or there's other decks that don't necessarily need the elf feature but would love a tap, add green, like a Graia's Cradle on a creature, basically. And this being able to do that is really good.
I mean, by my count, you have Graia's Cradle, which obviously is not legal in Modern. You have the flip card, whatever the heck it's called, the one that flips into a Graia's Cradle. And then you have this, which, if I'm correct, this is the third one of these, right? There isn't a fourth card that does that. This is like the third Graia's Cradle type of ability that exists.
I'm not going to confirm that there's not some weird 7-drop or something that does it, but that from a tournament playable perspective, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's very interesting. This card exists. I don't know how much better this is going to be than some of the other things that are already out there. The fact that it's triple green makes me think that this is really good, but again, Elvish Archdruid already exists. I guess my point is,
but I would play 8 Elvish Archdruid if I was given the option. That card's insane, right?
True, it's one of the kill on sight cards.
You do not lose if you untap with Elvish Archdruid. And pretty much. Unless you top deck it and you have no cards in hand and you have no cards in play because you're just losing the game at that point, but then you're losing regardless. Doesn't matter. Having 6 of these, especially with Collected Company involved and being able to
that's a fair point. Get
more hits on getting a 3-mana elf ball chain going seems right up the alley. And then the fact that it is triple green is better in Devotion decks, right? This with the Nykthos or anything that needs that multiple green pings is going to be pretty good.
The Nykthos component you just mentioned is actually very interesting. It really does turbo this out. But yeah, cool card, definitely interesting. Should have an opportunity to make an impact.
Yep. Now, the last green card today. Sorry if you had another green card you want to talk about. If you want us to talk about a green card we didn't talk about, maybe we'll talk about it next week, but you're going to have to comment that below. And hit that like button. That one. It's right there.
Z formation.
Hit the like. Wild Shape. Green instant. Choose one until end of turn. Target creature you control has the base power and toughness, becomes that creature type, and gains that ability. You can be a 1/3 turtle with hexproof, a 1/5 spider with reach, or a 3/3 elephant with trample. We actually talked with Jules Robbins, who is the lead designer of this set last night on our Commander stream every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. PST. That video is also on the Kess Games YouTube channel, which we'll link below. That comes up every Friday. So he streams on Mondays, videos are up on Friday. But Wild Shape... he said that at one point that a lion or a tiger was going to be one of the different options on the card instead of the elephant, where it was going to be a 4/2 tiger because they wanted to be more aggressive. Basically, the idea is they wanted one protective option, which is kind of the point of the card, and then one defensive option and one aggressive option, and that's where they ended up.
Yeah, so I mean, what's interesting about this, and when I read it, I was a little confused at first. So it doesn't erase the abilities that the card already has. So, for instance, if a card has Infect, it keeps Infect. It just, what it does is it adds another keyword ability like hexproof, and it changes the base power and toughness and the type. So for the ability for this card to take, say, like a Glistener Elf and take it from being a 1/1 and then make it into a 3/3, that's like just an interesting piece that this card has the ability to do. It also has the ability for one to give it hexproof. So it does have sort of the built-in versatility to play in an Infect Shell. We all know how powerful Blossoming Defense ended up being. And in a lot of ways, Blossoming Defense giving hexproof and +2/+2 to a 1/1 creates a similar thing that this is doing. This just has the versatility here.
Yeah, the benefit here is trample, right? Like Blossoming Defense. Blossoming Defense is better in this card if what you're looking for is power buff and hexproof, right? Because this either gives you +2/+2 or hexproof. You can't get both. But what this does give you is +2/+2 and trample or protect your creature from a removal spell. And I think that's the big thing that puts it over the top for me. Yeah, and like the only other one is like sometimes they're just gonna like somehow trick you into being able to block with something that would have killed your creature, and you can sometimes make it a 1/5 reach situation and have it not die to that 4/4 that maybe they pumped or something. But yes, the elephant giving trample to an infect creature is like I think the big game here, because the other options that are like protective spells, so it's like this Vines of the Vastwood,
Groundswell,
Snake Skin, whatever, they don't. Yeah. Well, no, because those are just pump spells, right? Like the protective ones.
You're talking about the protective ones, right.
Yeah. All of those do not give trample, and there's not actually a lot of good trample. Plus, like 1 green pump spell give trample, and this does that with having it have the backup plan of being that hexproof card that you often need, which I really like.
Yeah. It's like every time they print a new variation on an effect like this, it's always interesting to pay attention to. And it's also interesting to pay attention to because given the nature of the metagame, one of these effects versus another one of these effects is going to be more important. So trample is something that we didn't have available to us on a similarly costed card. Now we do. So now we have another option to play with. Yeah, I think this card's cool.
So the next section, which is blue, Yuan-Ti Malison is the first card. 1 in a blue. Snake Rogue, 2/1. Yuan-Ti Malison can't be blocked as long as it's attacking alone. It's a very lonely attacker. Whenever Yuan-Ti Malison deals combat damage to a player, venture into the dungeon. Enter the first room or advance to the next room.
This card, I pulled this card and we were unsure to talk about it. We wanted to make sure we talked about at least one card that involved the dungeon. I don't know how good this card really is. I think depending on how much value a dungeon actually brings to the gameplay, this will or won't be an incredibly high value card. If dungeons are just a medium effect and it doesn't actually get you very far ahead, then this is not much better than any type of. This ends up being worse than like an Ophidian. But in my opinion, the fact that the creature type is rogue, which has been pushed and is much more significant than it used to be, and the fact that for 2 every single turn you could advance and get some effect of a dungeon, this may end up being very, very cool. I do think that those rogue decks want to be attacking with more than one creature, though. So I think that's where this gets held up just a little bit. I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this, but that's why we pulled it.
I mean, the first time it hits, it has the option of either doing 3 damage that's unblockable, gaining 1 life, or scrying 1. The second turn it hits, it can create a red goblin creature token, create a treasure token, which is pretty good, scry 1, or do 2 additional damage, or have the player discard a card, or you discard a card, sacrifice an artifact, a creature, and a land, which is an insane thing, but then you get a 4/4 black god horror creature token on the next hit. The next hit is you can get a scry 2, you can get a +1/+1 tag it on the creature, you can drain them. Like it does do some cool versatile things, right? And like by the second hit you're drawing a card. So to me it feels like adventure is like worth scry 2.
Okay, interesting.
And but is maybe better than that. Is like a more, but like it's somewhere between drawing a card and scry 2.
I think what's interesting about this is that there is always a new sort of method of understanding when it comes to these replacement effects of drawing a card. We've talked about this a lot, actually, right? It's whether it's a scry, if it's a surveil, if it's a treasure, if it's a clue, if it's a food, like what is it actually worth? How close is that to just drawing a card? Is it better or is it worse? And so advancing into a dungeon, we're just not quite sure yet how good that is and what it actually balances out to being. there's no real way of knowing until we get to play with it a bit more. I right now think it's a little worse than drawing a card, but we shall see. But that's why I wanted to talk about this card. What we got next?
Yeah, it's going to be, I'm going to try making the mono green whenever you cast a creature spell, adventure one once a turn for our like Monday night commander game, which comes out next week. This is Monday night, so it'll be a week from tonight. I might audible to something different, but that's right now the plan. And if I do that, it'll be interesting to see what it feels like, how good adventuring into the dungeon feels like. The next card is the Black Staff of Waterdeep, a single blue legendary artifact. You may choose not to untap the Black Staff of Waterdeep during your untap step. Animate Walking Statue, 1 and a blue. Tap it. Another target non-token artifact you control becomes a 4/4 artifact creature for as long as the Black Staff of Waterdeep remains tapped. Activate only as a sorcery.
So this card is interesting. What's cool about it, but also a little bit of a hindrance, is that you can't play multiples because it's a legendary. And so you could play 2, I guess, but you can't play 4 of them. And ultimately, if it was non-legendary, it would be sweet because one could animate the other. And that would be nicer. It would be nicer that one of your 1-mana artifacts in the deck would be able to just like turn into a 4/4. This kind of functions like an Ensoul artifact, which is always an interesting effect in Modern. Depending on the metagame, you can just like dome for a lot of damage. Where I think this is particularly interesting is the fact that there's a number of pretty good 0-mana artifacts that you can play in Modern. Tormod's Crypt comes to mind. There's definitely a few others, a bunch that cost 1. But if you play one that costs 0, the ability to then play this on turn 1, play your 0 cost, hit your second land drop. If nothing else, on turn 2, you just turn your Tormod's Crypt into a 4/4 and swing. And you just leave this tapped. So it does allow for those decks that are playing lots and lots of cheap artifacts, 0-cost artifacts, and soul artifacts, Darksteel Citadels, to have repeatable ability to dome for 4. It gives you repeated access to an actual threat, but how good that is, not totally sure, but I do think it's an interesting card.
I think I like it because before Ensoul Artifact, there was a time where people were playing it as a 1-of. And the biggest flaw with Ensoul Artifact was always like, if they kill it, you're now 2-for-1.
Yeah.
And what this allows you to do is you play one of these. A lot of the time it is just a 1-mana blue artifact that triggers all of your Metalcraft, makes affinity better, is eatable by Ravager, right? It's just like an artifact that exists as an artifact in play. But then as the game goes on, is able to turn your random Ornithopters or the new affinity flyers that draw cards or random other things into base power 4/4. And that on its own is like really powerful. So the fact that it works on both ends is really nice.
Also, don't forget, any modular creature is a 4/4 plus its counters.
Correct.
So
correct.
This adds 4 power to an Arcbound Ravager. Which is pretty good. I mean, that's pretty powerful, right?
Yeah.
And modular, if you put all of your Ravager tokens onto a Vault Scourge or something like that, you just add 4 power, right? Your Vault Scourge now becomes a 4/4 with all of its tokens. So there's some interesting stuff with this card. It's cool. I think it's unique. I like it. I like that it's cheap.
I'm also excited just like in Standard to like on Arena jam like 4 of these and 4 treasure vaults and just like try and get people with treasure vaults. The next card is, and this is an ad by you, Grazilax Illithid Scholar. 1 blue, legendary creature horror. When a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand. Whenever one or more creatures you control deals damage to a player, draw a card. It is a 3/2.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason this card is here, and we can just talk about it very briefly, is there is a pretty storied lineage in Modern of blue creatures that want to return to the hand to get an ETB effect. And there's like a bunch of them. There's the Hideaway one that was printed in Modern Horizons 1, that when it leaves play, you get the card under it. There's obviously the Ninja Bear Delver type of decks that want to be returning things to hand and replaying them. There are effects like Vendilion Click and things like that. So I think that it's a cool card because obviously turning your creatures into Ophidians, or at least, turning your side into an Ophidian offensive is strong. And it also means that because you can return the creatures to your hand, if they want to block some of your Merfolk, if you put this into a Merfolk deck or something like that, you just get your Lords back, right? You don't really,
right.
There's not a whole lot of ability for them to just stonewall you. You get through with the stuff you get through with, you draw cards off those. The ones that you don't get through with, you just return to hand and replay. And especially in a deck like Merfolk that's playing off of Mirror Regery and the whole like tapping on tapping thing, there's actually some value there. So I could see Grazilax being in there. It's a very competitive 3 slot in the Merfolk deck, so I don't know that this is in there. But this is doing two different things that blue decks like to do in one card. So I do think it's an interesting and very cool card that hasn't existed yet. That's what I got.
Next card. You come to a river. Ben, you've come to a river. These are your options. It's one in a blue. It's an instant. You can choose one of these two options. You can either fight the current or find a crossing. If you were to choose fight the current, you return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If you were to find a crossing, look for a way to cross the river, you could target creature, have +1/+0 until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn.
What card is this?
It's called You Come to a River.
Oh, it's actually called You Come to a River.
Yeah. One of the cool things about most of the instants and sorceries in this set is that they're like, all the modular ones are like a encounter or something happens in your adventure and you have to choose option A or option B to be able to beat it or fight it off.
I see.
So this is like your party just walked into a river and you're like, okay, I can try crossing it by like swimming against the current. And then if I do that, I'm going to lose a creature. It's going to get bounced. A non-land permanent gets bounced for 2, or I can give this here creature unblockable by finding a way to cross over it. For me, the reason I have this on the list to talk about tonight is another infect card, right? Like giving +1/+0 and unblockable lets you get that infect damage in around something that they can't deal with, while also giving you the option and versatility of being a removal spell, right? Like return target non-land permanent to his owner's hand for 2 mana is like on the verge of playable. This is a CDH playable card for sure, and is decently playable in this format. And adding the ability to do that plus and or get your like big creature in for damage is, I think, worth the consideration in that deck. A deck that is often looking for incremental ways to interact out of the sideboard that keep it on game plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying there is very, very, very similar to the green card we were mentioning a second ago that is modular, in the sense that we have seen a zillion different versions of blue on instant return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. That gets printed in every single set. And there's always a riff on it, whether it's like Surveil one, if it's going to be Scry one, if it's going to, right? There's always there's always something to do with it. City's Blessing, something. This one adds our ability to now get +1/+0 and unblockable. So that just fits a little bit more nicely into the deck that wants that effect. We haven't had this version of it yet. And I think what you're saying is pretty true. Getting, a pump is great, while also clearing the way or buying yourself the turn for your already, pinging away infect style deck. I don't know that this is playable, but it is an option we haven't had before. So it's cool.
The next card is Tasha's Hideous Laughter. 1 blue sorcery. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until that player has exiled cards with the total mana value of 20 or more.
So I put this down, and the reason I wrote this down is because in the old days, the best mill card that existed was Glimpse of the Unthinkable, right? That was what it was. It was blue-black, mill 10. Mm-hmm. And you would get 10 cards for 2 mana. Over the years, they would play with that ability and they would give us a more aggressive one. For 2 mana, you'd get 7, you'd get 8. Now, milling has been pushed so far that 2 for 10 doesn't seem that good anymore. So you used to look at the ones that cost 3, Sanity Grinding, Mind Funeral, all these different ones like that. And for 3 mana, your rate had to be really strong because 3 was more of an awkward mana cost, especially in Modern, right? Mm-hmm. So where I look at this card, and this card stands out to me, is that the CMC in Modern is so low by, like, in general. There are some decks that play almost entirely 1-drops. 1-drops, 1s and 2s. Combined with mana, for 3 mana here, there's a very real possibility you're going to end up milling 20 cards. It's totally possible you will end up milling 20 cards for 3 mana. And I mean, certainly there's, you're playing against blue-white and you hit like Teferi, or you're playing against Death Shadow and you hit like an Angler, and that kind of screws you. But also just the fact that like lands have 0 means that, with a bunch of 1-drops and 2-drops and a bunch of lands, it's not beyond the realm of possibility this is going to be between 15 and 25 cards for 3 mana. So I could, and in multiples, it doesn't get any worse. It's not like, you do it once and then the second one has diminishing returns. This is the kind of thing within like a Snapcaster style deck or something like that. I could very easily see a couple of these just winning the game. I think maybe not. Maybe 3 is too slow and you're not going to get the job done because you're just interacting with the part of the board in their deck that has no bearing on the rest of the game. But this is the kind of card that if you play it at a certain point in the game, it's not like Traumatize where it's half the deck. Cards like that get worse. If you play this later into a mill game, this just mills the rest of their deck in some cases. If they don't have enough left, it's over. You play this, you win.
Right.
So I think that there's probably a mill deck. That deck was already getting competitive. They've been so aggressive now with the printing, Maddening Cacophony, and all these other cards the last couple of years. I think that deck already was good. This just feels like a finisher. For 3 mana, this is going to finish them off a lot of the time.
Well, something that's interesting to me on this, I think that like there are decks with Laros in it, right? Laros decks is and you have Blitz, and those decks have probably an average converted mana cost of like 1.5, and that doesn't include lands often. So even if they have an average converted mana cost like 1.8, if you add lands, you get closer to 1. So like then you're getting close to this hitting on average 20 cards. I think
Exactly.
I think you're probably closer to 10 to 15, like is what I would expect, though. That can change. And with that in mind, I think like it's just over the line to me for like a mill deck. 3 mana at sorcery speed versus like there's now so many good 2 mana options that do like 7 to 10 that are more guaranteed. Exactly. You're not just gonna, but like on the other hand, the decks that are playing with higher expensive things, those expensive things are needed for them to win the game. And if you just exile 2 of their Primeval Titans, maybe they can't win or they can't draw into the next one. So I think
that's the point you make that stands out to me, right? Which is that basically if a deck is playing something that costs 5 or 6, it's one of their best cards. You're getting rid of like a lot of the time the best thing they're doing.
Right. Now the fun thing also is in CDH, like where the average deck converted mana cost is 1.2, if not less than that. This is a blowout card. This just like eats half of your opponent's graveyards. And the nice thing about that format is that often if you just like get one of their combo pieces, their decks actually no longer can win. So I actually think this is like a CDH staple.
Interesting.
Because it'll just like, hey, 3 opponents, if you get unlucky and your Thassa's Oracles are in the top 20 converted mana costs of your deck, you lose. Or you have to figure out another way to win. Good luck.
I've always been fascinated with mill decks. I think this card's really cool.
Yep. Next card, Demi-Lich. Blue, 4/3. This spell costs blue less to cast for each instant and sorcery spell you cast this turn. Whenever Demi-Lich attacks, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, copy it. You may cast the copy. You may cast Demi-Lich from your graveyard by exiling 4 instants and or sorcery cards from your graveyard in addition to playing its other costs. This card is dope. This might be my favorite card in the set.
I'm pretty much right there with you.
Or scariest.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a couple reasons that it's so dope. The first one is that I need to own this in foil. I like love the art. It's so reminiscent of the those skeleton ghosts in Zelda when you get into which temple is that?
They're in the Forest Temple.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, because remember how you like turn over the hallway and then they're like in that room and then you can like flip it over. Right.
Totally. It is the Forest Temple. Yeah, it's very reminiscent of those.
They're in a bunch of other ones, right? That's like a common Zelda enemy throughout all Zelda games, but that's like the distinct one I'm remembering.
Yeah. So I think this feels like a card
Shadow
that could
Temple.
make Phoenix decks. They could really push Phoenix decks back up. I know Phoenix decks have already kind of been back in the top 10 or 12, but this feels like Phoenix's 5 through 8. Like this feels better than the Crackling Drake that we used to see people playing. This just feels like a card that and this is another one of those cards where the banning of Gitaxian Probe is so essential because like that is the card that would make this just like so many different decks.
Sure.
Gitaxian Probe makes this just a complete insane card. But I mean, even those decks, because they're playing Gut Shots and Lava Darts, depending on which build, combined with, just like 1 mana cantrips, Thought Scour, filling up your graveyard, like this is just a good card. I mean, this card is doing a lot of things that you need. It doesn't have any evasion, and it does get lightning bolted, and you do spend a lot of resources to get this thing into play in some cases. So it's not like it's just busted powerful.
Not necessarily, right? Like you could literally just spend 4 mana. Like 4 mana for it's not like you have to cast instants and sorceries ahead of time. It gets cheaper. So for every 1-drop you play, on turn 4, every 1-drop you play just lets you play this in addition to those 1-drops. And then once it's in your graveyard, like what I love about this card in those decks is it's a great like backup engine for like blitz decks where like, oh, they've been able to answer all my creatures, but it doesn't matter that you answer this. This is my graveyard. It's going to come into play. If you can't get rid of it before I attack, it's going to better than Snapcaster Mage and instant or sorcery out of my graveyard, including getting to like you could bring it back for the Magma Opus decks.
Oh yeah,
right?
those are sweet.
Because
I love
you don't have
decks.
to, you cast the copy. You don't have to pay for it. So being able to like attack with this, get Magna Opus. Magna Opus, you can use the ramp in this if you need to. Yeah, I think this card's really sweet. And like we haven't even got to the point of like talking about like trying to make what's it called happen? The mill deck yourself deck. This has
Laboratory Maniac?
Hogak. This
Sure,
has
sure.
Hogak vibes because the cool thing about this card is also is once you cast 4 instants and sorcery spells, that's it, right? You have now cast. You don't need to cast anymore, so it will always it'll always be free from that point on. No matter how many you want to cast that turn, all of them are free. It's not legendary either, so if you cast 4 and you have 2 in your hand, you can put both of them into play.
Right. It has a little like it has some Vengevine vibes in that sense. And the fact that it's a 4/3 actually is even more on brand there. Yeah, I mean I also think the middle ability here that we're not really talking about, which is just the value ability. Whenever it attacks, exile up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, copy it, you may cast the copy. Like all the other stuff is really cool, but just
I was wrong. You don't get to cast it for free. You don't get Magna Opus. You just get a copy of the card that you now can cast.
Yes.
It works like that other card that they just showed. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I was wrong there. But what I'm not wrong about is being able to Hogak these.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like having this as a 4/3 that like, because like we're talking about all the combo-y versions of this, you know, but we're also like not talking about the just like this is in your hand and maybe you don't have any kind of wild shenanigans. Maybe it's just like turn 4, you just cast like you just cast an opt and a thought scour and then just a 4/3 for 2 mana. And now the next turn when you attack with it, you just get to flash back your opt or your thought scour. Like it's a very good value card. It just has a lot of value.
Yep. I think this card's like really great. And like the fact that there's conversations on like it just being decent in general and conversations of it being a combo piece is like the exact place where a card starts looking scary. I think this is in the top 3 cards of the set. For sure.
I also just like, don't you want this card in foil? I feel like it's going to look so dope in foil.
Yeah. It's going to depend on what the foiling process looks like for the eyes and the smoke.
That's fair.
It could look really dull. Like if like just like the skull and the background all just like are flat with each other. If they're not, if they do a good job though, it could be really cool.
If they do a bad job, I'll just pay for an altar because this as an altar could also be insane.
Yes. All right. We're now on to the color white. White's getting close to dope. We're getting close. Like we are in the midst of it being 2.5 years from when everyone started complaining about white, and we are getting answers to those complaints. Speaking of which, Guardian of Faith, 1 white, Spirit Knight, Flash Vigilance, 3/2. When Guardian of Faith enters the battlefield, any number of other target creatures you control phase out.
Yeah, I mean this card. One thing about this card that's like a little wonky. Well. It's 3 mana, and they've actually given us a spirit, correct? They've given us a bunch of different really sweet 3 mana spirits now over the last few years. So many that in fact there's no way to like play them all in a deck. You have to like pick and choose which ones you want. Mm-hmm. And there's not even like a clear delineation of like which ones are the best ones anymore either. So it's another great option. I think this card's really cool. And I actually think now that I've seen more of it, I'm actually totally fine with phasing having come back. It was such a confusing ability back in the day that they stayed away from it for a long time. What's dope about phasing, what I like about phasing so much is that like it doesn't have enter the battlefield, leave the battlefield things. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, it's like one of the few things where like you can essentially exile something without actually worrying about that. And so it totally invalidates the card. Like it's not there to be affected anymore. I got really used to doing this because I enjoyed Teferi's Protection so much, as many people do. That card's so powerful. Once I started getting used to doing that, then I was like, oh yeah, this ability's great. Just like bring this back, but don't put it on like a stupid island, like or stupid land like Teferi's Isle, because that card's terrible.
Yeah. I think they know how not to make terrible cards now, right? They're not like using phasing as a drawback yet. And even if they did, they would like know what the cost needs to be to make it worth it. But B, the Jules talked about this on the game we did yesterday, on the stream, and basically he said because of Enter the Battlefield effects being so powerful now, especially, Blink was hard to cost correctly as a way to protect creatures. Because more often than not, if we printed Blink on something, it was more easily done to take advantage, like Ephemerate does with the
evoke creatures,
with the Solitude. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is create cards that can be aggressively costed, that can protect stuff from board wipes, or protect stuff from removal spells, or protect you from damage, like Teferi's Protection. And this allows you, phasing coming back allows you to do it. And they figured out a wording that like was easier for people to understand. The one thing that it's interesting to me is that, like, I think in Spirits you still want the 3/1 that you can sacrifice to give everyone indestructible. I still think that's better than this card in that deck.
Self of Spirit.
So the 2/1, yeah. But I think this card, honestly, I want to see more play in other value engine decks that aren't necessarily Spirit focused. Like, I don't think this card is that good in Spirits. I think this card is better in decks that want to protect their threats, or just want to be able to have this kind of like more control decks that want to protect creatures that they have in play. Or want to be able to like wipe the board and protect things that they have.
I think like there's a couple different ways this card is also really, really cool. So the way that phasing is worded is that they return to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of their controller's next turn, which means that this card can flash in. If you guys are in some sort of a combat situation, if you're playing a creature deck and they're playing a creature deck, you can flash in your creature. You can block with your creatures, flash in Guardian of Faith. They phase out. They no longer exist. Now they come back into play under your control during your turn. They don't, like, summoning sickness isn't a thing. And now you have 3 more power, plus you've saved your creatures. I am correct in that, right? You can block and then before damage, phase them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that creates a big time swing as far as your ability to block with a bunch of creatures, flash this in, phase everything out, turn around, attack with those creatures, adding 3 more power to your board. That's really powerful. And then the last thing about this card that I think is really cool, they actually have been pushing Knight just a little bit more as a creature type the last couple of years. We've seen more Knights. Spirits we've seen a ton of, but Knights are something they've been doing more and more of. So the fact that this is a protective Knight in a Knight tribal deck is another very cool thing. Spirits have a lot of those. Knights don't.
Right. Next card. This is one of my favorites in the set. And there's like a chance I just make this. I get rid of Halvar because I didn't really love Halvar, and just make this guy my new best friend, Oswald Fiddlebender, officially a gnome in Magic, a gnome artificer legendary creature, 2/2 magical tinkering, white tap, sacrifice an artifact. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. This is a 2-mana legendary birthing pod for artifacts.
It's really good. This is actually a card that I think would be really fun to build. And we haven't talked about it yet, but I think this would be a really fun commander, a mono white commander. I think this would be a super fun card to build with. But as far as modern goes, it's very powerful. There are really, really good chains you can do. I'm sure there are probably already really, really cool birthing pod-esque artifact chains that people have come up with. And last but not least, I would just like my alias in life to be Oswald Fiddlebender. I mean, that's just a phenomenal alias.
It is a good name. Yeah, I like this. I love me some artificers sacrificing. I like a goblin artificer. I like an Oswald Fiddlebender. I like a birthing pod. I like an Oswald Fiddlebender. I like chains. I haven't in my head figured out exactly what the like combination of cards you need to just win the game with him is. But I'm sure it's there. I'm sure there's a pod chain with artifacts to get you to the win.
Yeah, the other thing that's cool about this too is that the spell bombs, not the first set, but the second set of spell bombs, when they go to the graveyard, you're able to pay 1 to trigger their card draw ability.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to sacrifice them to draw a card. If they are sacrificed to something else, I think this is the case with like Nile Spellbomb. When it goes to the graveyard, if you pay 1 black, you get to draw a card. And so I believe that's true.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that if you have a card like that, which is just a generally really good, valuable card in your deck, and you play it, and you're like, well, I don't need to pop this right now to exile their graveyard. you can pop it to Oswald Fiddlebender, get a 2-mana artifact into play for 1, pay the 1 black to draw a card to keep your value engine going. And I know Nile Spellbomb is going to be one of the key cards in general that you're going to see in decks with this card that people just play in general. And having it and the ability to use it as an engine piece that also draws you a card is very, very important. So yeah, I think this is going to be one of the more played cards in the set, I have to guess.
Like you can use this. So you can sacrifice a 1-drop artifact, any of the spell bombs. You can get Corridor Monitor, which untaps Oswald.
Oh yeah.
And then I think there is also a 3-drop that enters and does an untap thing. So there's I'm excited to figure out a way to just like pod chain into some type of combo win.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for. But this guy's he's really dope. I really like him. I'm excited to do some shenanigans.
Agreed.
Not to mention in modern, you have options like eggs, and you have options like just even regular affinity and being able to get go up the chain like
old Ironworks type of decks. I mean, this is another piece that goes into Wordex that allows you to build slightly differently. Also, probably this ends up playing pretty well in a Lantern Control style deck. This is probably a pretty good way to set up some of those pieces that you need.
I'm so excited it's a white card as well. This is the exact type of thing I've been saying needs to be in white, and they finally did it, and I'm super hyped. Next, we have what I believe is the best white card in the set, and one of the best cards. I think I had this as my second best card in the set. Portable Hull, white artifact. When Portable Hull enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls with mana value 2 or less until Portable Hull leaves the battlefield.
This is one of those types of cards where the design space was open and they hadn't done it yet. And this is one of those great designs where you're like, oh yeah, I'm sure somebody thought about this. I'm sure this had come across someone's desk as an option at some point, and then they just were like, yeah, this doesn't exist yet. What a cool thing. A white artifact that's going to exile a non-land permanent. It's opponent control, so you can't do your own thing. CMC 2 or less. This is just perfect. It's not an enchantment, it's an artifact, so it plays in that kind of Oblivion Ring space. I like that they're doing more colored artifacts too, actually. That's something that they've started to lean into more the last few years that we originally saw in one of the Alara sets. I like colored artifacts. I think they're cool. Yeah, we saw Eldraine. We saw more of them. I think this card's fantastic. I really like this card a lot.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a very flavorful Dungeons and Dragons card. This is one of the few times I've played Dungeons and Dragons. I have had this item, and it's dope. Survived a bunch of demons trying to murder me for a while. It answers so many things that are important in the format. There's a reason that Engineer Explosives is good right now. This eats most of those things. As we mentioned earlier, just CMCs in the format have gotten so small, and it being able to be just an efficient sorcery speed removal spell. It does kind of feel to me that it's a little late now that Prismatic Omen is now in the set. I hope that's what the card is called, but the one Prismatic Ending, sorry. The Modern Horizons card, 1 and X, exile a thing equal to how many colored mana you've spent to cast the spell.
Right.
And that scales a little bit better than this, but only that goes to 3 and this goes to 1, and this is 1 and 2 always. So if the format becomes a little bit more lenient on 2-drops and 1-drops versus 3-drops, I think this becomes a more play. But cool. It'll be an interesting kind of combo of this, path, and that, and which one's the best removal spell in the format.
Well, remember also this says target non-land, not non-token. So this is also a 1 white way to kill any token forever, which is very good. It's a very, very, very good thing that this card does. It's versatile, but gets rid of many, many tokens. Go ahead.
All right. We are now into the world of red.
There's some good red cards in this set. I'm actually excited.
Before we get there, I do want to say thank you to all of our patrons one more time, as well as to make sure to check out all the links below for ways to follow the podcast. If you haven't, please hit a like. If we missed a card in one of the colors that we're talking about tonight, please comment below which cards you'd like us to talk about on our recap next week. And please check out on the Kess Games YouTube channel, link below. Last week's game, we had Shivam Bot from the Commander Advisory Group and Jules Robbins, who is the head of the color red on the Color Council of Wizards at Wizards of the Coast, as well as the lead designer from the Dungeons and Dragons set that we are talking about today. So it was a really fun
Jules
episode.
Was the lead designer of the set? I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's
did you
so
not catch
cool.
that? Yeah. That was why he was I was the lead designer for this.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, we were talking, I guess I must have just missed that detail. That's so cool. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so exciting that like some of our close friends from years past here in Los Angeles have gone on to just make the game we love so much. That's like a really cool thing.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Jules, there's actually, if you want, there's even like the second episode of the podcast ever has Jules Robbins on talking about Magic back in like 2014. It's 2015. It was before Ben. Jules has been on this podcast longer than Ben has.
Crazy.
Next, first for the first red card, Hobgoblin Bandit Lord, one red creature goblin rogue. Other goblins you control get +1/+1. It's a classic Goblin Lord, but it's got the ability of red tap. Hobgoblin Bandit Lord deals damage equal to the number of goblins that entered the battlefield under your control this turn to any target. It is a 2/3. People are mostly excited because this is just another good card with Snoop decks, right? Like just having one of these is an additional way for that deck to just kill your opponent if you're able to get enough tokens into play. And on top of that is just a good Lord to be able to have in play. And those two things together make it easily playable in a deck that is looking for easily playable, good versatile goblin creatures.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anytime a deck like that gets another piece that costs 3, it's a little funky just because, like in Modern, you need the cost to be so low and aggressive that this is very good, but it's not pushed in the same way that I think. I mean, it would be really pushed if it cost 2. But the thing that's especially cool about this is those decks often have a bunch of creatures swinging with haste because of some of the other lords. Also, Skirk Prospector sacrificing creatures with this having haste to have the mana to activate this. Even if you've sacrificed a bunch of creatures to get mana, doesn't matter because it's how many had entered the battlefield under your control this turn, not ones you have in play. Even if you sacrifice them for mana, this still taps to get mana to get damage out.
The one card that it is really good with is like as you were mentioning, like normally 3 mana spells aren't the best in like there's like a gluttony of different 3 mana lords available to tribes, and those aren't normally the best. The thing that Goblins has over other ones is because of Snoop, you're able to like you have a 2-drop that as long as this is on top of your library, you gain this ability, so you can take advantage of stuff in that sense. And
it plays pretty well with Empty the Warrens too. That's like another...
exactly. Yep. For the Fecundity Goblin deck combo decks, which are always really cool. Next card is Flame Skull. 1 red skeleton. Flying Flame Skull. Can't block. Now, you were talking about the skeletons from Zelda.
Yeah,
this is actually
also
that card. The artwork is literally a skeleton with fire coming out of its eyes and head. Flame Skull cannot block. Rejuvenation. When Flame Skull dies, exile it. If you do, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play one of these cards. If you cast Flame Skull this way, you can't play the other card and vice versa. It is a 3/1 flying. So bare minimum 3/1 flying for 3. That when it dies, it draws you a card. That card that it draws is either going to be itself or something better if you want that other thing. Sadly, this does not go infinite with Food Chain. I thought it did. It doesn't, because Food Chain exiles a thing, and this does not let you cast it if it gets exiled. It has to die and then trigger. So,
Let me ask you this. 2 questions. First of all, love the art on this card. Love how rock and roll this card is. It's such a metal card, Flame Skull. However, Rejuvenation, keyword ability on this that describes what it does. Now that you've read through the whole set and we're sitting here and we're breaking down all the cards, does the sheer amount of text and all of the different names bother you, or are you still totally cool with it and excited about it?
It definitely lost its coolness as the set previews kept going, right? Like my brain has stopped reading them. I still like it, but I think I've moved towards I would rather it be something they use infrequently versus something they do all the time.
Yeah, I said this earlier when you were up getting water to the patrons, and maybe you'll hear it twice here, but my general takeaway from the set when I read through it was I felt there was a little too much text. And even though those words like rejuvenation, they're actually irrelevant. They're just there for flavor purposes. Like they don't actually have any bearing. And I'm able to ignore them. I kind of had the feeling reading through the spoiler for the set that I sometimes have when I read a new, I open a booster in like a draft format that I'm unfamiliar with, where it's a little wordy. And I find my brain hurting trying to read all the cards. Like I need too much time. So I just start skipping words and ignoring them and just paying attention to the stats that I recognize. That's a little bit how I felt about this set. That being said, that has nothing to do with this card because this card is sweet, but just a comment.
I feel like that's fair. I think like The one problem with this set is like because of the D20s and the classes, there's like very long cards. And so adding this to that type of set makes it maybe a little bit tiresome versus on a set that would maybe be a little bit more simpler, would matter less. I agree. I think in the long run, these are going to be, this is cute, but I don't think I would want to see it more. My brain is definitely more tired with it than I thought I would be.
Yeah, this card is really cool to me for two reasons. Number one, I like skeleton as a creature type. I just think it's like cool. Second thing though, this is a recursive red threat that's not a phoenix. We don't get very many of them. That's not something that they do very often. They're almost always phoenixes. And this, a flying red creature is cool, right? Like just the fact that this is a pretty aggressively costed, a 3/1 flyer for 3 that also continues to come back, I think is just a very cool piece of the equation. Plus, if you're playing this in a deck where like, okay, my 3/1 flyer is not going to be able to get in, they have bigger flyers, they have blockers, or they have like a way to just kill this over and over again. That's cool. I'll let this stay exiled and I'll play the other card because it gives you the option to get a different card. I think this card's versatile and cool and unique, and I wouldn't be shocked if you see this start to show up in certain styles of decks that don't already exist.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I agree. Next card is Minion of the Mighty. 1 red for a creature kobold. Menace. Pack Tactics. Whenever Minion of the Mighty attacks, if you attacked with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, you may put a dragon creature card from your hand onto the battlefield tacked and attacking. 0/1. This is sweet just because it has the ability to sneak giant dragons into play.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a couple different ways that this is like epically dope. So first of all, it's 0/1 for 1, which on turn 2, you can just scale up this card and make its base power toughness 6/4 for 1 green. And just by doing that, if they don't kill it, you can put into play a Bogarden Hellkite or any one of the Giganto dragons that are available. And it doesn't put that dragon in play tapped and attacking temporarily. It puts it in play permanently. Dragon Lord Atarka. I would say Hellkite's probably the one that comes to mind just because you get the 5 damage right off the bat, and then it's also attacking. But then like this card on turn 1 combined with dragons and like Ball Lightning, you know, or like Ball Lightning or the Jund one from Modern Horizons 1 that I'm not thinking of the name right off the hand. Or it's not Jund, the Rakdos one, the one that is red, black, and they discard 2 cards, does like lightning. So like any of those with this card,
lightning Skelemental.
Yeah, if you literally play this on turn 1 and have a dragon in hand and play any of those 6/1 tramplers for 3, Groundbreaker, whatever, it's just like, I mean, if it's Bogarden Hellkite, then you're getting 5 damage plus the 5 attacking plus the Ball Lightning. That's 16 damage on turn 3. That's just coming completely out of nowhere. You might just win the game on turn 3. You might have just done something on turn 2 and just like it's over.
Right.
So if you scale up on turn 2 and then you Ball Lightning on turn 3, that's it. Game is over. It's done. So I think this card is combo centric, and the fact that it costs 1, not 2. As we've seen, like that elemental one that can like put something into play, like an aura from your graveyard into play that people were getting super into last year. I can't think what the name is right now, but this is even more aggressive than that because it costs 1. So just a card that stood out to me as a cool little enabler.
For sure. Wish. 2 red. Sorcery. You may play a card you own from outside the game this turn. They printed just Wish. It now exists. All of those Wish cards, they're this.
Number one thing about this card that I think is the best, this is a red ability. I'm glad that it's in red. It feels like a red ability. And the fact that it is the most expensive version of this, it's not 2, right? Like Glittering Wish costs 2. This costing 3 makes it aggressively costed, but not cheap. And the fact that it's red is exactly accurate. Like, I don't even think this card's exciting. I think it's just a fair card.
Yeah, I think Storm decks are already talking about it, right? It being able to find any Storm piece out of your sideboard is like really good, and like it's gonna see. I think it's definitely gonna see play in Modern. There's other decks we've talked about that this just being an available option is very, very strong. But I think it's fairly costed. I think 3 mana to have to do that is totally fine.
Yep.
Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah, it's funny. I don't have that much to say about it. It seems like a card that you would have thought existed by now, but now
Yeah, it
it
does
does.
not. Yeah, so for those who, I guess for those who don't know, this is based on, there's a series of wish cards that all do this from way, way back in the day that aren't not modern legal.
Judgment, I think.
Yeah, that like range for, and they all are a little bit more specific. The only one that's legal currently in modern is Glittery Wish that can find a gold card. That card has never totally made it, though it has been format power, like it has been a very powerful card in the format a few different times. And it just is never, those decks have actually gotten cards banned out of them, which is why it's fallen out of favor. But it's just a powerful option to find good cards out of your sideboard, either if you're having a combo deck like Storm, being able to cast this from your graveyard to find those cards, or if you're a just like getting your Grape Shot or getting your Empty the Warrens or get the next Storm piece you need, or get like if your opponent just happens to have like a piece of graveyard deck main deck, being able to get a removal spell. So like it's just going to be a really versatile option always. And for decks that are already trying to tutor, this allows them to have a 3-mana tutor, which I think is really cool. I think Wizards also realized that like Wish effects are probably great for all 60 card formats because you don't have access to, you don't have to shuffle as much. So it's like a helpful thing there.
It's like one of the major design focuses, it seems like, over the course of the last couple of years, is like less shuffling. They're like, Arena is great because we don't have to shuffle, and so we can avoid that. That's why you've seen a lot more effects like this, like Planeswalkers that can get something from your sideboard, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's interesting the difference between like Arena wants it because Best of One is looking for more ways to make sideboard cards relevant in a format where you don't have a sideboard, and like Learn, etc. But they don't care about shuffling. But then they're like, but also win-win in formats like Modern and Standard and Paper Magic, where we're trying to avoid as much shuffling. This cuts shuffling out. This makes it so you don't have to shuffle anymore in the game. So it's like a win-win for both digital and paper, and a weird amalgamation that then Commander just has to ignore. And this is the last red card we're going to talk about today. It is Zariel, Archduke of Avernus. Legendary Planeswalker Zariel. 2 red. +1. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. 0. Create a 1/1 red devil creature token with when this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. -6. You get an emblem with at the end of the first combat phase on your turn. Untap target creature you control. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Loyalty 4. So it ultimates after 2 turns if you just give +1/+0 and haste. What I like about this card is as a 0 ability, it does the Elsbeth thing, right? It does 4/0 or for just net neutral. I'm not subtracting loyalty. I'm making a 1/1 token to protect my Planeswalker. That's like the bare minimum what a Planeswalker needs to be able to do in some way at 4 mana is protect itself. And now it's been outclassed.
People underrate devil tokens. The it dies and deals 1 damage thing. They underrate the fact that like it can kill 2/2s. Like it's better.
Yeah, and and Tybalt, 3-mana Tybalt from War of the Spark has seen play in Modern. Now, partially more because of its other ability of players can't gain life, but the Devil tokens are not irrelevant, and one of the reasons it is still seeing play. And like the fact that obviously Gut Shot is playable in this format, the fact that just doing 1 damage to target creature is good enough is another one of the reasons that this card will see play. Just like that token is a real threat as a blocker. Then you add the ability that to untap. So you can protect her. She's protectable pretty easily. Then you get to untap, and giving haste to anything you play in a turn with a Planeswalker is not to be underestimated. Like this is a sideboard card for Primeval Titan decks, or just like getting to play any type of like card you have with haste is very good. Top decking a Tarmogoyf and making it like a 6/6 haste for 2 is like an insane ability. And Jund, like there's just like things you can do with this that this feels
probably underrated. Yeah, I mean, I'm not as excited about this card as you are. We did a little TikTok review of this card last week on your TikTok, which you guys can go follow Alex at Kess Wiley,
same as
on TikTok. This card doesn't wow me. I think 4-mana Planeswalkers nowadays have to be like really bonkers, I feel like, to get my attention. And this doesn't feel bonkers. It just feels like perfectly good. But I understand why you like it, and I do like that you get to make a devil for 0. I think that's powerful.
All right, we're now into the black mana part of the evening. When I saw this card, I was like, this card is Ben Bateman entering his next show, being like, I'm ready to play some music. And it is Grim Wanderer, 1 black
Yep.
goblin warlock, which I thought was funny. 5/3. It's flash. Tragic backstory. Cast this spell only if a creature died this turn.
Yeah, so this card is, I mean, there's a couple reasons this card is cool, right? I was trying to brew a deck around this card to figure out how to make it work best, but I think a 2-mana 5/3 flash creature is good anyway. Like, that's just a good card. Needing to have a creature die to do it, you need to have some control over that. But there are certainly cards like Wild Canter and Skirk Prospector that allow you to sacrifice to themselves to create mana. So they kind of do double duty to get this card into play. I was trying to figure out, could you play this with like a Bone Picker deck? Because the 3/2 Bone Picker, it's a 3/2 flyer, Death Touch, costs 3 less to cast if a creature died this turn. So it ends up being a 1-mana card. Like Wild Canter on turn 1 casts a 3/2 flyer with Death Touch. And Wild Canter then, if you already have it in the deck, allows you to cast this. So now you're kind of 2-for-1ing yourself to be able to get the good rate. And that starts to play into the Mere Superior space, which I love already, which is creature mana. You can like throw Ignoble Hierarch into a deck like that, so you're getting the Jund mana. There's cool ways to do this. I just don't really 100% know how to make this card pushed. But I do think that a 5/3 flash creature for 2 is good, as long as you can guarantee you'll always be able to cast it. So it stood out to me as at least an honorable mention.
I like that you can cast it if your opponent's creature dies.
Yeah, agreed.
I think the fact that you don't have to make your own creature die, you can like just use Fatal Push. Like for 3 mana, you get a 5/3 Necrotal is like maybe good enough. So I like that as just the thing that it can do. And it's a really good rate. And there are not too many ways to make it hard to. There are not that many. It's not that difficult to make it work. The next card, Sphere of Annihilation, X and a black artifact. Sphere of Annihilation enters with X void counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile Sphere of Annihilation and all creatures and planeswalkers with mana value less than or equal to the number of void counters on it, and all creatures and planeswalker cards in all graveyards with mana value less than or equal to the number of void counters on it. So put this into play on turn 4 for 3. X equals 3. On turn 5, all 3 drops and in graveyards and in play go away.
Yeah, now this card is a little interesting because it only hits creatures and planeswalkers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't hit artifacts. It doesn't hit enchantments. It's just creatures and planeswalkers, which I feel like the kind of deck that wants to take advantage of this card and cast this card doesn't want it to be limited to creatures and planeswalkers. I think it's fine in the cases that it is limited to those cards. And maybe if you're an artifact heavy deck or you're like artifacts and enchantments, you're actually happy because it doesn't nuke your board. But I do think that in general, cards like this want to hit everything. And I think you're usually disappointed when you have a card like this and it doesn't get all of the stuff that you want it to get.
I don't know. Like I play Wrath of God. Like Wrath is a card, Supreme Verdict cards I've played in the format, and this can be set up to be a one-sided version of that, or better than those. Like,
yeah, but those cards get rid of everything when you play them. This has to wait a turn.
Sure, that one turn difference is the thing that is worrisome, and the problem that you generally have to cast something that is lower than the converted mana cost beforehand. I think this is like possible as a one of in like a Grixis control deck, but I agree that I think it's just under the power level of where I want it to be.
Well, I also think that the flip side of what I'm talking about is that it gets extremely powerful if you're playing an artifact-heavy deck that's not playing creatures because nothing on your board dies. You get to keep all of your sweet artifacts and things you're building up. If you're playing an artifact control deck, this gets rid of planeswalkers, which is a big deal, and also creatures. So you're able to handle a lot of business. It's just that this card will see play at some point because there will be a deck that wants to take advantage of exactly what this card does. It's just not going to be like a 3 or 4 of in some big format defining deck. It's going to be a card that you have to wait to find the right deck for it.
Right. Next card, Ebondeath Dracolich. 2 black, legendary creature, zombie dragon, flash flying, enters the battlefield tapped. You may cast it from your graveyard if a creature not named Ebondeath Dracolich died this turn, 5/2. So you can't like sacrifice it, recast it, But otherwise, this is a very hard to kill 5/2 flying flash.
Yeah, I think this card's great. I think this card's really powerful. Now, There's the reality that it costs 4. So even if you're casting it from your graveyard, this is not the same thing as like the blue 4-mana Lich thing we were talking about, the skull. It's not like a Bloodghast or that type of a card because you obviously have to spend 4 mana to cast it. However, it is a 5/2 with flying. So that's where like the real difference is that it's more expensive. You have to pay for it, but it's really hard to kill. And if you're flashing it in, you don't actually really care that it's tapped. You can't block with it when it comes in tapped, so that's kind of a bummer. But if you set up, if you're setting up any kind of a recursive, zombie-centric, sacrificing, whatever type of deck, this does actually play pretty nicely alongside Grimwander with exactly that deck I was talking about with your, Wild Cantors and your Skirk Prospectors, where you can just sacrifice those things to generate some of the mana to cast this thing from your graveyard, and it is a recursive threat. 5 is more significant than 4. You only have to hit with this thing 4 times to win the game. So 5 is a pretty big chunk. I just think that probably having to spend the 4 mana to recast it is going to be a bit of a problem, but I do like this card a lot. I think this card's cool.
I think you're going to play the crap ton of this and stuff like Standard, and I don't know if I'm going to make it all the way to Modern.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
What I do like about it is that it is a great card in it is a Jund playable card, right? Because Liliana you can discard this for value.
Yes.
And then if you have a creature, you can just attack with a Bloodbright Elf, have it get in, they block, or they block something else, and then you're able to get this. Or something that's really cool is you can discard this with Liliana and then later sacrifice your Dwathi Voidwalker to get it back.
Yep.
Right. I think Dwathi Voidwalker being a key piece to that option.
Somebody pointed out in one of our comments that there's Dwathi. It's just not Dwathi. It's just Dathai.
Douthie. I don't care. Sorry, listeners.
I know you don't care.
I don't. I'm gonna call it Dwathi Voidwalker for the rest of my life. It's gonna bug you.
You will never stop.
Actually, we can make a tier on our Patreon. That if you spend X amount of dollars on our Patreon, I will work hard to learn to say a card of your choice correctly.
And we're going to make an even higher tier that if we get to it, I'm going to play a song and Alex is going to sing.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
he's going to go for it. He'll give it his all.
I'll sing my best. I'll sing my little heart out. And hopefully it's a song I know. I can sing Bohemian Rhapsody right now. I can.
You can. There you go.
Next card is Asararak. Another card I'm never going to say correctly. Asararak, the Archlich, whatever. I hate it. 2 black for a 5/5. Legendary creature zombie wizard. When it enters the battlefield, if you haven't completed Tomb of Annihilation, return it to its owner's hand and venture into the dungeon. So 3 mana venture to the dungeon, and then it comes back to your hand. You get a creature ETB, you get a creature exit BTB. They're both ETBs. Enters and exits the battlefield. When Asarak the Archlich attacks, for each opponent, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token unless that player sacrifices a creature. So, more importantly, this with Omniscience goes infinite. Just kills your opponent. So there are 2 of the dungeons aren't the dungeon this guy needs you to complete to stay in play every time you cast him, and so you can just play him for if you could figure out a way to play him for free. So in Legacy, Alluran just goes infinite with this guy. This is an Alluran infinite combo. You get to go through whichever dungeon you want, as long as it is not Tomb of Annihilation, which is the one that he references, infinite amount of times. You can just keep going through it again and again and again and again. And as long as you can cast him for free, he bounces to your hand. You can cast it again, bounces to your hand, cast to your hand. So you can go with Omniscience, do that. With the Rooftop Storm, is actually what it's called. Because he's a zombie, you can go infinite there as well. In Legacy or Commander or other formats, Alluran also goes infinite. So it, I think, is one of the best just go infinite, I win if I have Omniscience options in Modern that also has some amount of versatility and playability otherwise, right? It's actually not the worst to scry 1, make a goblin token, make it get a treasure token, make it a 2/2, draw a card, right? It actually isn't going to be that terrible as a 3-drop 5/5 that blinks in and out. But the point is, you play it as a way to win the game with Omniscience and just go infinite.
Fair. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
But it's there's too many words on the card.
I don't have a lot of thoughts on this card because I read it and here's okay, this is my old man get off my lawn thing. I don't love cards that reference other cards on them. Like if you have this and if you have this, if you have not returned this thing, not because I think it's not cool. Like I think it is cool. I understand why they do it, and they do it because they want you as a Magic player, especially if you're a newer player, to read the card and be excited to look for this card that it references. They've done more of this over the years. Like I can think of like 10 or 15 cards now that have done this. But I have a hard time evaluating a card when I read it like this that makes reference to something that's not in front of me, and it's a turnoff for me as a player. I'm not sure why.
But you know that this, like, you always have access to this card. Right, the
Tomb
card
of Annihilation. You're saying because it's one of the dungeons.
Yeah, like literally, it's not a card, right? It's dungeons sit out of play. If you cast a card that references a dungeon, you can pick one of those dungeons. It now enters like the same spot that a companion hangs out in, and now or like experience counters hang out in, and you can move your way down that specific dungeon. Tomb of Annihilation is one of the 3 dungeons. It's the one where you make a 4/4 Death God at the end of the whole thing, or whatever.
I fully get it. I think my point is when I'm looking at this card right now offhand, I can't tell you what Tomb of Annihilation does. I don't know what that dungeon is offhand. Maybe I'll learn it at some point. Anytime I ever see this card in a pack or in a binder, unless I've memorized at that point what Tomb of Annihilation does, or I have it handily to my right at that point, I'm not going to be able to just like right offhand know.
But you also understand why that it actually goes infinite by not getting that tomb, by not getting Tomb of Annihilation, right? Like you get that. I want to explain it to you because if you don't get it, I want to make sure our listeners also get it. Instead of getting Tomb of Annihilation, you get one of the other 2 temples or one of the other 2 dungeons. And then because he's free, you get to cast him for free infinite amount of times because he comes into play, you move over in the dungeon, and then he returns to your hand. And as long as you don't complete Temple of Annihilation, the one that you don't choose, you can just keep playing him for free, and he will keep returning himself to your hand, and you'll get to keep moving it down the dungeon. And
why is he free to cast?
Because you have Omniscience in play, or you have Rooftop Storm in play.
Or Rooftop
Like
Storm.
that's what the combo is, right? The reason you play this card is for the Alluring combo, is the best version of that. But there are decks in Modern and Commander that are playing Omniscience that are looking for stuff like this, that have like incremental value that can sometimes just win you the game with Omniscience. And so this card allows you to have that benefit. It's a versatile option as a win condition for Omniscience decks, especially because the one that gets you a treasure token can be used to ramp into Omniscience.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Next card. Asmodeus the Archfiend. 4 Archfiend. I see you comment section. 4 black, legendary creature, devil god, 6/6, binding contract. If you would draw a card, exile the top card of your library face down instead. Black, draw 7 cards. Or black, return all cards exiled with Asmodeus the Archfiend to their owner's hand, and you lose that much life. So possibly, at a minimum, in play, untap, 4 black mana, you draw 7 cards and lose 7 life.
Yeah, it's like some version of like a combination of like a Gristlebrand and a Necropotence is kind of the general vibe of the card.
Yeah, the effect that most people are talking about right now, there's a whole debate in my mentions on like it's all about Necrotic Ooze, right? That's the card people are most excited by, or other cards that can like exile things in your graveyard to gain their abilities, and Necrotic Ooze is one of the best. And the ability that like you can play Necrotic Ooze and then just pay 3 black to draw 7 cards is like maybe good enough. That's like a 4 mana effect that lets you do it for a thing that you would put in your graveyard, or you can just reanimate him into play to get it. And the other benefit people are like, the thing people are arguing is if Necrotic Ooze, and I believe from judge friends who are like level 2 judges, I thought if you had Necrotic Ooze and you had, let me bring up the cards because they will bring them up, but Arcslogger, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, Arcslogger, the red one.
Yeah. So it's Arcslogger is 3 red beast for a 4/5. Pay 1 red, remove the top 10 cards of your library from the game, and it deals 2 damage to target creature or player. It's like one of the early ways to like try and erase your graveyard for a dumb effect. There was a conversation on if you have Necrotic Ooze in play and you have Arcslogger and Asmodeus in your graveyard, can you pay 1 red mana to do 2 damage to a thing and exile the top 10 cards of your library, and then pay 1 black mana to return all 10 of those cards to your hand.
That's so dope.
And right now, the jury is out. It has not been decided upon. It won't be until we get the official rules things. There's a lot of people arguing that it does work, but then there's a lot of people arguing that there's an obscure ability called like linked referencing, that a card that exiles something and then references the exiled card can't reference other cards that card exiles for that ability. It's like a linked ability in a weird way. But because also draw 7 cards is in the middle, people are wondering, is it linked? Because it's named with Blinding Contract, is it linked? So there's a lot of like weird rules around this card that literally my Twitter mentions have not shut up for the entire day. Thank you. I live for interaction on Twitter, so please follow me there at Kess Wiley. I'm a vampire, but for Twitter attention. Only positive though. But on the other hand, this is just another Grizzlebrand like effect. I think this is worse than Grizzlebrand in Modern, other than the fact that stuff like Necrotic Ooze can combo with it. Though Necrotic Ooze can also combo with Grizzlebrand. But just draw 7 cards and not pay 7 life, draw 7 cards is a maybe worthwhile way of not losing the game because you didn't lose 7 life.
I think I agree with you. So Grizzlebrand's definitely better. The hard cast of this being a 6-drop versus I think Grizzlebrand's an 8-drop maybe.
Yes.
Is significant. 6 versus 8 matters. Mm-hmm. But I would say, if we're being honest, getting this into your graveyard and then Necrotic Oozing this, and then from there, have like casting Necrotic Ooze, which if I remember correctly costs 4, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So like it costs 4. This has to be in your graveyard. Then you have to spend like 3 black to draw 7, which I'm not saying is not good. Of course that's good, but it does cost triple black. Like you're still paying like a real amount of mana. Right. So then you want to have mana open to do something with those cards. It sometimes very clunky. That's why I think this is just not as good, but maybe we'll be wrong and people will do cool stuff. I think some of that other funny stuff you're talking about is the like maybe the funnest part.
Yeah. If the Arcslogger Necrotic Ooze this card combo is a thing, different conversation. Being able to do 2 damage to your opponent and draw 10 cards is an insane ability.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Now this CDH, the CDH community side though is like loves this card. This card is like there's a really good Rebel A.I released like almost the end of Evangelion-esque seeing the world and the universe expand as she watched this card get printed and previewed this morning, and I also highly recommend checking that video out as well. And that is the end for black. That is the last black card. Ending on a devil god, you know? Who would have thought 20 years ago, Magic was afraid of the card Devil, wasn't allowed to put a star in a circle. Now we got Devil Gods. We've moved up in the world. We are now going to talk about artifacts, golds, cards, and lands. The next card is Eye of Vecna. This is a 2-mana legendary artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and lose 2 life. Already love it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card and you lose 2 life. So, colorless, single player card draw comes on the front, replacing itself. So it's like on a base level, pretty decent. And then if you're like a mono white deck or a green deck who wants this, or a red deck that needs to draw into stuff, and you don't really care about your life total, and you have excess mana, like you like flood out regularly, or like a burn deck that like kind of needs late game card draw against different opponents, I think this is a great sideboard card. I think this is like a great option to like side in if you're an aggro deck against a control deck.
I really like this card a lot. I think that the fact that it comes down and replaces itself immediately is a big deal. One thing that artifacts that cost 2 that draw a card when they come into play have always been on my radar for years and years and years. Like they're always good. Mm-hmm. So the fact that this is just going to be 2 mana, if it's in your opening hand, it essentially cycles, right? You play it, you get a card back. It allows you to keep hands that have less lands because you're going to be able to play this on turn 2 and draw a card.
Right.
But then also the fact that this is a card that does that, but then offers you the opportunity to just draw into more cards. I think this card's pretty fantastic, actually. And it's colorless, and the ability to do it is colorless. It's legendary, so you don't want to fill a deck with these. But if you are playing the right kind of deck and you play one of these cards, I see no reason not to play this. I think this card's actually very good, and I'm calling my shot. This is going to be a big time standard player. This is going to be in big decks and standard. I'm positive.
Do you think people will play the combo with this?
With the other, like, exile the 2 things to get this and the other thing.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what it was, but maybe we were talking about this and hand, because Hand of Vecna is the other one.
There's 3. I'm just going to Google Vecna. Hand of Vecna is the equipment. 3 legendary artifact equipment at the beginning of combat on your turn. Equipped creature or creature you control named Vecna gets +X until end of turn, when X is the number of cards in your hand. Equipped, pay 1 life for each card in your hand. Equipped 2. So you can for 3 mana just equip it, and then it gets +X equal to how many cards are in your hand.
It's 2 mana to equip it, but you can pay 1 for each card in your hand to equip it.
No. That you get. There are 2 equipped options. You can either pay 1 life to equip it, or you can equip it for 2.
For sure. You said you can pay 3 to equip it. That's why I was correcting you.
No, three to play it. Sorry.
Yeah.
So
what is Vecna? Oh, it's the Book of Vile Darkness,
yes.
right? That's the one.
Yeah.
So it's black legendary artifact, the Book of Vile Darkness. At the beginning of your end step, if you lost 2 or more life this turn, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. That obviously plays with the pay 2 life thing. And then tap, exile the Book of Vile Darkness and artifacts you control named Eye of Vecna and Hand of Vecna. Create Vecna, a legendary 8/8 black zombie god creature token with indestructible. It gains all triggered abilities of the exiled cards.
So it is an 8/8 that gets +X at the beginning of your upkeep, equal to how many cards are in your hand, and you may pay 2 mana to draw a card and pay 2 life, which then would create a 2/2 zombie.
And also, because it's of all of the exiled cards, that includes the Book of Vile Darkness, which means that because you lose 2, you get the zombie at the beginning of the end step as well, because that's the third exiled card.
I thought I said that, but maybe I didn't.
I know I might have just maybe you did, and I was just not paying attention. But
yes.
It's a pretty shenanigans triple.
So if you have 2 cards in hand because you played Hand of Vecna, you Eye of Vecna, and you drew a card for the beginning of your turn. At a bare minimum, this is a 10/8 indestructible creature that brought a 2/2 into play.
I mean, it seems really fun. Maybe it's more likely in standard that you would see somebody try to go for this. I can't imagine in modern somebody actually going for this because all of this work for an indestructible creature that can just get pathed is like basically useless.
Oh yeah, I don't have the other 2. There's a reason we didn't talk about the other 2 cards in our modern as like cards to look at in the modern review. We just got here because of Eye of Vecna. I think that it is a card that all like the fact that the Book of Vile Darkness is close to actually playable, right? Like if you lose 2 life, get a 2/2 zombie at the end of each turn. At the end of your turn is like close to a playable standard card if you build around it. And the fact that Eye of Vecna is like a totally like a staple, has like the vibes of a staple, means the other 2 cards feel like I could play one of each of these.
Because it's like part of a thing. Yeah.
I'm going to have 4 of this one card. It's not weird that, like, because like Hand of Vecna is always going to be okay, right? Like a legendary equipment that gets +X equal to how many cards are in your hand that you can equip for free is not bad. So like
the issue with Eye of Vecna is that it's legendary. That's the problem. That's the problem with the card.
Well, but it cantrips itself. So if you got 2 of them, you just play it and let it die. You just pay 2 mana to cycle it.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
All right, on to gold cards. Gretchen Titchwillow, blue, green, legendary creature, halfling druid. 2 green, blue, draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. It is a 0/4. So,
is this very similar to another card?
Yes, it is very similar to the partner card.
Thrasios?
Thrasios. It is very similar to Thrasios. In fact, it is, instead of scry 1, draw a card, it's draw a card, put a land into play. I would argue that's better. Almost like entirely better. It does cost blue-green instead of 4 colorless. This is a card that also loves the training grounds. It is also a 0/4 for 2, which is not irrelevant, especially in decks that like to put extra lands into play and like to draw cards and have 4 mana to kind of spend on that. And it works with Mox Amber because it's a legendary creature for 2 mana. I think like a 2 mana 0/4 Thrasios in modern might actually just be playable. And this is just an option for that I think is pretty sweet.
It's so on brand for what blue-green has become these last few years. It's kind of I actually find it a little unsettling how much blue green has had this ability pushed. Like I look at this card and I mean, without training grounds, I guess it's just fine. It's not like a 0/4 for 2 that you have to spend 4 mana for this is that pushed. But it's just more and more and more of the same thing, which is just like blue green draws cards and puts lands into play to an absurd degree. Like, did we learn nothing from Uro? Did we learn nothing from like all these cards?
I don't think this is Luro powerful. Maybe with training grounds in play, it gets close to that, right? Like being able to, for blue and a green, draw a card and put an extra land into play might be just good enough. But I don't think this is Uro. I think this is like
No, not that's I don't think it's Uro at all. I think what I mean is that I don't know that I'm that entertained anymore with blue green just doing this. Like give me some variety with what blue green's doing now as a color combo. Like I don't know if just like more lands into play and drawing more cards is something that I wanted to see every set. It feels like we've been on this corner for a little while now. Maybe,
sure.
I don't know, maybe I'm just, you know what I'm saying?
I think part of it is that it's an ability that works together that is like relatively just fine. It's the same way that like red white equipment is in a lot of the sets. Like I think it's just like it's go-to mode. Like blue green has 2 main modes. It's put extra lands into play or put +1/+1 counter tribal things.
Yeah,
and like it can do other things. And when there's an opportunity for it to do that, like food or clue tokens, it will. But if there's not a specific thing for it to do, this is a go-to option. In the same way, I like when red-white isn't doing equipment or first strike tribal.
Right.
But sometimes that's just the way it is, though. In the same way that sometimes green-white is life gain or tokens. And sometimes black-green is graveyard shenanigans or sacrifice. You know, like...
Yep.
There's just things that the colors do, and we've just been playing long enough that it becomes redundant. I think the thing is that we've seen a lot more gold recently, and we're seeing enemy gold colors is where we're at.
And if you're gonna do blue green, I get it. Yeah, and they're simple abilities.
All
I mean, I think it's cool.
Next time we're going to sorcerer's class. You want to learn how to be a sorcerer? Come to sorcerer class. It'll teach you to sorcerer. When sorcerer class enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. Then you can, which is, I think, inherently almost good enough. This is an Izzet Charms base move. Blue, red, the level 2. Creatures you control now have red, tap to make a blue or a red. You may spend this to cast instants or sorcery spells or to gain a class level. So you can use those creatures to cast instants or sorceries or level it up. 3 blue, red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, that spell deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of instant and sorcery spells you've cast this turn.
Yeah, so I don't think this card is pushed enough to make a modern impact, really. But the thing that stands out to me right off the bat is that it is a powerful card in the fact that it is doing that thing that Izzet Charm does, the double loot right off the bat in the blue-red decks that want to fill your graveyard with things. If you want to get that Lich or you want to get a Phoenix in your graveyard or something like that, its base ability is strong enough. Depending on which version of those types of decks you're playing, if you're playing the ones that specifically are referencing instants and sorceries, this is less interesting. If you're playing the ones that reference non-creature spells, they trigger when you cast the non-creature spell. This gets a little bit better. And then I also do think that the turning your creatures into blue-red tappers to give you mana for your spells can be interesting in certain versions of the deck, especially in the versions of the deck like the Young Pyromancer ones, where your tokens that come into play are then going to be able to tap to add mana to cast more spells. That's the kind of engine that I can see this card really fitting into and kind of going ham. The idea that every time you cast an instant or sorcery, it makes a 1/1 off of a Young Pyromancer, that then the next turn, once you've leveled up, all of those are able to tap to add blue to cast cantrips. That's very good. That's a very, very powerful thing.
Yeah. All right, we're on to lands, baby. This one's a cycle. This is the cycle of creature lands. This is Hive of the Eye Tyrant, Den of the Bugbear, Nest of the Hydra, Hall of the Storm Giants, and Cave of the Frost Giant. And each of them is a land that if you control 2 or more other lands, it enters the battlefield tapped. So if it is the first or the second land you play in a game, it comes into play untapped. If it is the third or later, it comes into play. It hits untapped. So you want these early, which is really interesting. These are like a little bit worse than fast lands in that sense, but they come with extremely powerful and comparable to the original cycle of creature lands. Creatures attached. So you have Cave of the Frost Dragon, which is like very similar vibes to Celestial Colonnade. 3/4 flying white dragon creature. You have Den of the Bugbear, which creates a 3/2 red goblin creature with whenever this creature attacks, create a 1/1 red goblin creature token. So it like creates a cool land, a goblin token while it's attacking. So it's a whatever. It's a pretty common effect for goblins to do that.
Rabble Master?
Yeah, Rabble Master. It's got Rabble Master vibes. Obviously, it's not everything Rabble Master was, but it's got Rabble Master vibes. You have Hive of the Eye Tyrant. Until end of turn, Hive of the Eye Tyrant becomes a 3/3 black Beholder creature token for 4 with Menace. And when this creature attacks, exile target card from defending player's graveyard. It still lands. So like an interesting piece of graveyard hate on a black land. Bajuku Bog move over. We don't need more Bajuku Bogs. And then the Hall of the Frost Giant, or Hall of the Storm Giants is 5 blue until end of turn. Hall of the Storm Giants becomes a 7/7 blue giant creature with ward 3. It's still a land. So, and the last one is Nest of the Hydra. X green. Nest of the Hydra becomes an XX green Hydra creature until end of turn. It's still a land. X can't be 0. So you lose.
I mean, they're all interesting. I think when you compare them to let's compare them to manlands, and let's compare them to monocolored manlands. Sorry, the dual manlands and then the monocolored ones.
Yeah.
The difference is here that none of the monocolored manlands that we used to get, most famously, I think, is probably the 3/3 trample for the Jund one, and then obviously you had the 2/1 flyer, the Fairy Conclave. Those were pretty good. Obviously, the multicolored ones were better, and they were multicolored, so they had like a little bit more value. These feel like they're somewhere in between the two. Some of these are a little better maybe than the dual colored ones. I think particularly the white one here stands out, but the problem with these is that I don't know. The fact that they can be untapped in the first 2 turns is powerful. I'll admit to that. That matters a lot.
Massive, yeah. Like one of the problems with the creature lands is that they don't come into play early. Like they're terrible for aggressive decks, which are kind of the decks that and sometimes need them the most as ways to like deal with late game. Their answers being answered. Like the Hydra one and the Goblin one to me are like fascinating because like. First off, I think the black-red one was always close to playable.
Yeah, the pumpable one.
It just was like 2 mana too expensive for the fact that you also are going to have to pump it to be relevant. And the fact that it was always fire breathing, so it was never +X+X, it was always +X+0. And the fact that this is going to be like a 6/6 for 7 or a 4/4 for 5, it basically haste creature land is like way better. And a card that was almost good enough.
I think the blue one actually stands out to me as notable, and the reason being that it is untapped on turn 1 for you to be able to cast like an Opt, or for you to be able to cast like, I mean, those decks don't really Thought Scour themselves, but like it's untapped on turn 1 to be able to Serum Visions, and it comes in tapped later in the game, but those decks don't care about a tapped land, as we've learned from Celestial Colonnade. So then the fact that like this is now a card where you can Wrath or Verdict or whatever, clear the board, untap, and if it's later in the game, you have a 7/7 for 6 mana. Like a 4/4 Vigilance is good. A 7/7 is bonkers. That ends the game very quickly. Now you have to have a lot of lands to be able to do that and still keep open interaction, which those decks, they like the fact that Colonnade has Vigilance. That matters, that it stays untapped. Mm-hmm. But I do think that blue having access to a 7/7 is pretty significant. Like that's a big creature.
Really with any of them, like, right? Like being able to, because Stoneforge Mystic is in the game, like being able to cast Stoneforge Mystic and have it come in as a, like you either get to play this on turn 1 and or 2/2, Stoneforge Mystic is castable, or if you have to cast it on, play this on turn 3, like you draw into it, you can still play Stoneforge Mystic or activate the Stoneforge Mystic activated ability, getting a Cauldron into play, and then you have this creature land. Like I think these are being really underrated. Actually, I think like being able to come into play turn 1 and 2 untapped is like really underrated, which is funny because so many people are often like anti-tapped lands, and then B, like
this guy.
You are B, like. The Kurt ape, the ape, the green one, the green man land creature land that came
for some reason I'm having a hard time remembering it at the moment, but yes, green one for a 3/3 trample.
3/3 trample ape. The blue one that made a 2/1 flyer.
Treetop Village and Fairy Conclave.
Yeah. Treetop Village and Fairy Conclave were modern staples for a very long time, right? Yeah. Those cards were modern playable, and these lands are all better.
Ish. I mean, ish.
No, they're better. I would rather
just because they can be untapped. That's the biggest reason.
I would rather have a Hydra than the ape in the way that, like, especially because it can block, like you can dodge lightning bolt, right? Like that's one of the reasons that card fell out of favor. I would rather have like the goblin than the other options, right? Like obviously the red and the black one, but like, yeah, I think overall they're definitely better, and I think they're just better. I think the only one that's maybe close is Fairy Conclave, but it not coming into play untapped was like a big loss, and these do come into play untapped.
Yeah, huge. I mean, that is the point. That's the number one thing to take away from it, is that your ability in Modern to have a land in your opening hand that you've put into your deck that you can play in multiples that's untapped to do action in the first 2 turns is everything. Like that alone in itself elevates these to it in some levels better than even the 2-color ones. Yeah, like I am so concerned with my opening hand when I build decks being able to do everything that I want to be able to do in the first 2 turns of the game.
Yes.
And most of the time it's because the deck is stacked with 1 and 2 drops that if you play a tapped land on turn 3, you still have cards that want to cost 1 and 2 that are going to be able to utilize your untapped lands, versus having an opening hand with 2 tapped lands in it. And you just look at your hand, you're like, I can't even keep this. I can't do anything. I'm a turn behind. So I think that's pretty interesting. We'll see where these end up though.
And the last card for the review is here, and it is the best card in the set. I think.
Is that true? It's your favorite?
I would. This was my number 1 pick, and I think a lot of people, when we asked online beforehand, just to make sure we didn't miss anything, what their picks were, this was a lot of people's answer, and that is Treasure Vault. It taps for 1 colorless. It's XX tap, sacrifice Treasure Vault, create X treasure tokens. Seems good. You know how many times
it's also an artifact land.
You know how many times I had to read it to realize it was an artifact land? I was like, oh, that's cool. It's like a blasting station or whatever. Or like, it's like, that's cute. And like, you get treasure tokens, and so you can use it to ramp. Like, I don't know how good it is, but it'll be pretty decent. Oh, it's an artifact land.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Between Horizons 2 now and this, they've now pushed artifact lands to be in Modern, which is cool. There are other options. It means what I think it means is that they're going to
Urza is an enchantment land, right?
It is, but also there's the come into play tapped.
Oh, the come into play tapped ones. You're right. I forgot about
2-color ones. I think they'll just unban the artifact lands pretty soon. I can't see any reason they would be printing these other things in. It seems like they don't even seem dangerous at this point. The format's so powerful. I'm sure there'd be powerful things people could do, but not more powerful than other things. But yeah, I mean, this card's really, really good. This card, the fact that it's an untapped colorless source that is also an artifact on its front side, but then it has this built-in late game ability of like, I'll create lots of artifacts. Like decks that want artifact lands, they rely on having lots of artifacts. So the fact that this can sacrifice late in the game to increase your number of artifacts drastically is such a huge boon, to combine with the fact that now Urza Saga is a land that's been printed and that creates artifacts. Like, you're definitely getting into the territory of, I'm getting into the territory of wanting to build a Hellkite Tyrant deck very badly.
Yeah. Shivam was like almost yelling at Jules on the Commander stream yesterday for like, he had just built a cool treasures deck with all of the treasure cards and the new treasure cards from Modern Horizons, and then this set came out and there's like 12 brand new amazing treasures cards that like threw the whole deck into turmoil. But yeah, no, this card's really great. Like, making treasure tokens is really powerful. Being an artifact is powerful. Like, late game, you're able to kind of scale. Like in Affinity, like a gameplay mode is going to be like, oh, I top decked a Ravager. I'll play this. End of my turn, I'll XX make 4 treasure tokens, sacrifice this land, untap, sack all the treasure tokens, make my Ravager into a 6/6, swing for 6, right? Like,
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's just generally very, very powerful. Yep. Yeah, the one card we didn't mention, I just wanted to point out because I think the name is so sweet. Froghemoth. We didn't talk about a Froghemoth. I just like that there's a giant frog. All right, I'm done.
That was it. Ben was like, no, there's no way we're ending with this card as the best card on the last card, because the best card on the last card, Froghemoth.
Froghemoth, yeah. No, it seems like a fun set. Hopefully I'll come around on the big text box stuff and all the like D20s and all that stuff. I right now feel a little overwhelmed by it. Like I feel like if I open a pack of this and I try to draft it, it's gonna make my head hurt. But there's a lot of really powerful, really cool cards. So this will probably be the first Magic set since we're in the like I feel really comfortable going and playing Magic in person at stores again. Like this will be the first brand new set, I think, since that's happened. You know, I'll probably play this like at FNM a handful of times is my guess. And so I'm excited for that. I'm definitely excited to go and open some packs.
It has Ikoria vibes in the sense that it's going to be, it feels like playing with the cards is going to make them more fun than reading the cards.
I agree completely.
Especially with the D20 and with the D20 one and the D20 cards, which we didn't talk about a single one because maybe one of those will be playable. We'll see. Or the dungeon cards. Like these are cards that feel more viscerally easy to play with than they are to totally understand what they do ahead of time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes. For those, make sure to check out the Patreon, as we mentioned. Maybe by the time this episode comes out, Ben will remember to add a feature that you get to pick a card I have to say correctly. I'm hoping it costs like $30 though. And then I will learn it. I will, and Asmore is included, I guess, is a possible option to include.
Asmore.
Realizing what I'm signing myself up for. And then please check out our Patreon, patreon.com. You also get the episodes early. Generally, we apologize to our patrons this week. The episodes came out at the same time, but normally they come out the same a week ahead of time on Patreon. So if you want to listen early, it's there. Plus, there's a bunch of bonus content that's really fun. We also do our live streams every Monday night. We talked about that last week. We were Shivam and Jules Robbins, both very influential people, as in designers and CAG members. They were on the podcast or on the show. That will be on the Kess Games YouTube channel. We moved all of the Commander content to a secondary YouTube channel because like the algorithm didn't love having both the MMcast, the modern content, and that. So we're splitting it off. So it goes to the old Kess Games YouTube channel. That's where like Top Decking lives. We have as well, one other thing. I have a TikTok. Follow me on TikTok at Kess Wiley.
Indeed.
I do content there.
Indeed.
And then Ben is doing music. He's got music out there in the world.
I do. I got 2 songs out there. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Apple. I'm all over the place. And I'll be touring in November. Check out tickets in the description of the video below. Every single one of them will be kind of like a meet and greet hangout. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll hopefully see you guys on the road. And I might even try to drag Alex out on the road with me for at least one of these dates. Maybe I can get him in Chicago or something like that. Otherwise, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you same time, same place next week. We'll see you playing Commander before then.
Absolutely. Bye, everyone.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media.